नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः। ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ध्यानमूलं गुरुर्मूर्तिः पूजामूलं गुरोः पदम् मन्त्रमूलं गुरुर्वाक्यं मोक्षमूलं गुरोः कृपा। ॐ कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। सद्गुरु भगवान की जय, सच्चिदानंद भगवान की जय, कृष्ण भगवान की जय, गीता माता की जय। हरि ओम। We are discussing Srimad Bhagavat Gita, 4th chapter, and yesterday we saw 22nd sloka. Jadricha labha santushto dvandhatito vimascharaha samaha siddhava siddhosa kritvapina nibadhyate. Content with what comes to him without effort, free from the pairs of opposites and envy, even-minded in success and failure, though acting he is not bound. This we saw. He is not affected by heat and cold, pleasure and pain, success and failure, as he always has a balanced state of mind. He is not attached even to the things which are necessary for the wear maintenance of his body. This is what we were discussing. Such people whose mind is ever fixed on the self, he never cares for the bodily needs. He experiences neither pleasure nor pain, because pleasure and pain belongs to the senses and mind or intellect, etc. Whether or not he obtains food and the other things which are required for the maintenance of his body, the reason is that he is resting in his essential nature as existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, Satchidananda Swarupa. He is swimming in the ocean of bliss, so he does not care for his body and its needs. On this we were discussing yesterday how the great people never care for the bodily needs. They are not at all concerned with the body. They are totally different from the body, just as vasansi jinnani yatha vihaya navani grinnhati naro parani. Just as the people throw off the old clothes and accept the new clothes, so also they don't care even the body falls down. They never care for it. They are not the body. They are the user of the body. You are going somewhere, somehow, let it not happen. But if the car meets an accident, what will you do? You are safe. What will you do to the car? Will you sit there and break your head? It is smashed and leave it there. You will think for a new one. A man of thinking, he will say, "Oh, okay, it was so old. Okay, after 1 month only, it was going to be thrown off. 15 years I have used it. Let it go. We shall have a new one." So the wise people, they behave with this body like this only. They never get worried for it. People go on without food, without any clothes of those. They don't think of any needs. And nature takes care of it for some time, as long as prarabdha is there. Then the body falls off, just as the dried leaf falls down from the tree. Gata sangasya muktasya jnanavasthita chetasah yajnaya charatah karma samagram praviliyate. This also we had seen little. To one who is devoid of attachment, gata sangasya muktasya, who is liberated, whose mind is established in knowledge, jnanavasthita chetasah, muktasya, मुक्त है, ज्ञान में उसका चित्त स्थित है. His mind is ever established in knowledge. Who works for the sake of sacrifice only, for the sake of gods. The whole action is dissolved, as it were. Action never remains as action. There is no question of doer or non-doer. There is no action at all. One who is free from attachment, who is liberated from the bonds of karma, whose mind is centered and rooted in wisdom. What is wisdom?
Wisdom.
Huh?
Wisdom.
Yes. We are using this word very often.
Is a free, knowledgeable person.
Wisdom is knowledge. Where is the hospital? Near the post office. And where is the post office? Just opposite to the hospital. How do you understand knowledge? What is knowledge?
Completeness.
Complete jnana.
Completeness.
Completeness.
No knowledge.
Okay. Any other definition or explanation?
Something perceived by the senses.
Something?
Perceived by the senses. Perceived by the senses.
Something perceived by the senses. That is wisdom.
Knowledge.
That is knowledge. What is the difference then again between knowledge and wisdom.
The knowledge what we have collected, how we use that knowledge is wisdom.
You have mastered a little to twist the words. Anyhow, somewhat up to mark, pass mark of course. Any other understanding of wisdom?
The absence of ignorance.
Hmm?
The absence of ignorance.
Absence of ignorance. The post office is just opposite.
Informative knowledge.
Wisdom is nothing but absolute steadiness. It will solve all your problems. The universal definition. Wisdom means mind is never flitted or it is not moving at all. Conformably established. No movement of mind. That is called knowledge. Of course, that is wisdom. Knowledge may be increasing or decreasing, something may be. Knowledge is ever growing. It will always grow. Anyhow, wisdom, what we mean is absolute steadiness of equilibrium, which is also known as contentment, peace, and one-pointedness, dhyan, samadhi, etc., whatever you say, it is steadiness only. Steadiness of mind. The same mind takes the form of wisdom. If it is moving, then it gets some infinitive knowledge. So he says, to one who is devoid of attachment, who is liberated, whose mind is established in knowledge, that is wisdom. Who works established in knowledge means knowledge is neither growing nor decreasing. That means wisdom. Who works for the sake of sacrifice, for the sake of God. The whole action is dissolved. One who is free from attachment, who is liberated from the bonds of karma, whose mind is centered and rooted in wisdom, who performs actions for the sake of sacrifice in order to please the Lord. All his actions with their results melt away. His actions are reduced to nothing. They are in fact no actions at all. So, yajnaya charatah karma, whose karma is only meant for sacrifice. Sacrifice for the Lord. Lord or God or gods, there is difference also. We have to understand God and gods. If it is plural, then we have to think for it. If it is singular, absolute singular, then it is the absolute truth. If it is plural, gods, then we have to think many, and those many gods or maybe just as government is one, but government officers, there will be many. They belong to same government, but officers, when it becomes plural, then it is divided into different parts and different, you see, different heads, and they perform the work of the same one government. Similarly, gods are there who perform the work of God. Officers, government officers are many. They perform the work of government, one government. So gods means different, and God means absolute one, absolute singularity. So sacrifice also, it also can be one or many. When we do sacrifice for gods, that means semi-gods, and they are of little power. And if it is God only, then it is the absolute, say, omnipotency, we can say, above which there is nothing. So sacrifice with desire to have the results, that is performed for gods, and sacrifice without purpose, for sacrifice sake, that is performed for God only. Understood now the difference? He says Lord, so Lord will be one, isn't it? Those who do all their actions only for sake of sacrifice to the absolute Lord, to please Him, that means without any motive, without any desires, without any attachment, their actions, they dissolve, as it were, they lose their entity, identity of action. No action remains as action. And because he has mentioned Yajna here, so now Lord Krishna is going to give you many kinds of sacrifices. How many kinds of sacrifices are there? Brahmarpanam brahmavir brahmagno brahmanahutam brahmeva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. Brahman is the oblation. Brahman is the melted butter, ghee. By Brahman is the oblation poured into the fire of Brahman. Brahman verily shall be reached by him who always sees Brahman in action. Whatever action you do, if the mind is fixed on the Brahman, the absolute God, then all your action takes the form of Brahman, and you reach absolute Lord in the end. Your action becomes colored by the thoughts of Brahman. So action never remains action. On this, shall I tell you a story? Neela Varna Strigala. Neelavarashiyala. The blue colored fox, blue fox. There is a story, beautiful story. It is story only. There was a village somewhere in the outskirts of village. Generally the low caste people live. These servant caste, service class, the washermen, the barbers, and others like that, they live in the outskirts of the village. There was a washerman. He used to bring all the clothes of the villagers, and he has to wash them, color them, and give them after ironing. He gets his wages. One day what happened, and you know, when the village gets silenced after 9, 10 in the night, generally the wild animals means small animals, they enter into the village. Sometimes the small wild pigs, if it is near to the forest, they come into the locality to get some remnants of food somewhere thrown, something. And generally the foxes, they come into the village to find out some little food somewhere thrown away. So one night what happened, when all the villagers were quite calm and they have gone to sleep, in the late night, all the foxes from the nearby burial ground, they entered into the village and they were searching for little remnants of food somewhere. They were roaming here and there. Village was quite silent. One of the fox entered into the washerman's house. Somewhere was roaming around to get something. All of a sudden something fell down and there was sound. The washerman got up. He thought, what is happening outside? It is dark. So he took some torchlight and a lathi and very slowly opened the door without making any noise. And then he came out very slowly. And then all of a sudden, he shouted, "Who is there?" Or the fox ran. And while running, it was afraid, so it was running to save his life. So it fell into one of the drum, or where they put a tank of the colored water. It was colored with blue, and and it was ready for tomorrow morning, and the fox fell into it. Whole body was bluish, and yet it got up and ran away. Other foxes also from the whole village, they heard the sound and they ran towards the burial ground. So this fox also joined them. But alas, all the foxes started attacking it. Who is this? Who is this? Who is this? Get him away. Some stranger has come to our company. Maybe some CID or somebody. Everybody attacked him. Poor fellow could not remain in the gang and had to leave the gang and get away, and slowly, all alone, it met its death. So, blue-colored fox, Neelavarna Srigala. Like this, the wise man, the realized souls, their mind is colored by the color of the Absolute. So they are unfit for the society. They are thrown out, good for nothing, useless fellows. They are good for nothing. So they are thrown out of the society.
स्वामी जी आप ब्लू कलर्ड लेग के बारे में सुना है?
नहीं, आपका है क्या?
वो एक बार एक आदमी डॉक्टर के पास गया, सरदार डॉक्टर है, बोला डॉक्टर साहब मेरे घुटने में बहुत दर्द होता है, बहुत दर्द हो रहा है। डॉक्टर दवाई दे दिया, कल आके दिखाना 2-3 दिन बाद। 2-3 दिन के बाद गया, डॉक्टर साहब बहुत दर्द हो रहा है। डॉक्टर ने कहा कहाँ, उठा के दिखाइए। उठा के दिखाया तो डॉक्टर, वो सरदार बोला ये तो आपका पैर में नीला पड़ रहा है, ये तो नीला जहर पड़ रहा है, आपके जहर फैल रहा है आपका टांग में, आपका टांग काटना पड़ेगा नहीं तो आप मर जाओगे। क्या करेगा, तब तो काटना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो ठीक है काट दीजिए डॉक्टर साहब। एक टांग काट दिया। वो 2-3 दिन के बाद गया, वो डॉक्टर साहब देखो इधर देखिए ये भी नीला पड़ रहा है। वो डॉक्टर बोला बहुत खतरनाक बीमारी है सरदार, ये का टांग पूरा जहर फैल रहा है आपके शरीर में, वो टांग भी काटना पड़ेगा। वो टांग, दोनों टांग काट दिया। वो 2-3 दिन बाद फिर गया, डॉक्टर साहब ये तो फिर नीला हो रहा है। डॉक्टर कह रहा है तो रॉड डाल दिया, अभी नीला हो रहा है, दिखाइए। फिर देखा, कह रहा वो आपका जो जीन्स है ना वो रंग छोड़ रहा है वो।
अरे यार, भगवान,
ऐसे डॉक्टर से बचा हो गया।
आपका दीवार भी नीला हो रहा है तो आपका दीवार भी नीला हो रहा है।
जहर फैल रहा है, काट दो। So these so-called wise people, they are good for nothing, useless fellows. They are thrown out of the society. Anyhow, Brahmarpanam Brahmavir Brahmagno Brahmanautam Brahmeva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. One who performs all the actions for the sake of Brahman only. Every action gets colored by Brahman and everything becomes Brahman only. This is yajna or wisdom sacrifice, wherein the idea of Brahman is established for the ideas of the instrument and other accessories of action, the idea of action itself and of its results. Everything is colored by Brahman. By entertaining such an idea, the whole action melts away, as stated in the previous verse. Samagram karma samagram praviliyate. It melts away. When one attains to the knowledge of the self or the self-realization, his whole life becomes a wisdom sacrifice. Whatever he does, it becomes a sacrifice of wisdom, in which the oblation, the melted water, or the offering the performer of the sacrifice, the action and the goal are all Brahman. He who meditates thus fully upon Brahman shall verily attain to Brahman only. The sage who has the knowledge of the self knows that the oblation, the fire, the instrument by which the melted butter is poured into the fire, and himself have no existence apart from that of Brahman. He who has realized through direct cognition, Anubhav, that all is Brahman, does no actions even if he performs actions. Whatever he does, it transforms, takes the form of sacrifice, and then it becomes Brahman only. So in this way, a wise man performs sacrifice in all ways. Whatever he does, it becomes sacrifice. Sacrifice for absolute Brahman. And other types are also seen. Daivameva pare yagyam yoginaha paripasate brahmagnava pare yagyam yagyena ivopajuhyati. Other kinds of yajnas are there also. Some yogis in Upanishads also they have described how your swadhyaya becomes a yajna, how your teaching becomes a yajna, how your other works they become yajna. What is to be taken as fire, what is to be taken as ghee, all these are nicely described. That is in essence told here. Some yogis perform sacrifice to the gods alone, while others who have realized the self offer the self as sacrifice by the self in the fire of Brahman alone. The fire is self, the ghee also is self, the doer also is the self, so everything is self. Daivameva pare yagyam yoginaha paripasate. The yogis perform such sacrifices. Brahmagna pare yagyam yagyena ivopajuhyati. Some yogis who are devoted to karma yoga perform sacrificial rites to the shining ones, devatas. Shining ones. Devata means those who are luminous ones. Yoga performs sacrificial rites. Yoga. They take yoga as sacrifice. So yoga performs sacrificial rites to the shining ones or devas, gods. The second yajna is yajna, jnana yajna, or the wisdom sacrifice, performed by those who are devoted to jnana yoga. Jnana yoga. The oblation in this sacrifice is the self. Yajna here means the self. The upadhis or the limiting adjuncts such as the physical body, the mind, the intellect, etc., which are superimposed on Brahman, through ignorance are sublated and the identify of the individual soul with the Supreme Soul or Brahman is realized. Thereby they realize the self. To sacrifice the self in Brahman is to know through direct cognition, aparoksha anubhuti, that the individual soul is identical with Brahman. In this way, the body, the senses, and the mind also, they become the part of sacrifice. This is the highest yajna. Those who are established in Brahman, those who have realized their oneness with the Supreme Soul or Paramatma, perform this kind of sacrifice. This is superior to all other sacrifices. They put everything in the fire of the Brahma, the knowledge, so everything gets melted into the absolute. Some others also do different kinds of yajnas. Shrutradene indriyanyanye sanjamagnishu juhyati. Sabdadin visayananya indriyagnishu juhyati. They sacrifice one in the other. The body can be sacrificed for these senses. Senses can be sacrificed, means melted in the fire of wisdom. The senses can be sacrificed for the mind. Mind can be sacrificed for the intellect. In this way, one melts in the other, and slowly everything melts in the absolute self. Some again offer the organ of hearing, the ear, and other senses as sacrifice in the fire of restraint, sanjam, restraint of the senses, fire of restraint. Others offer sound and other objects of the senses as sacrifice in the fire of the senses. Some yogis are constantly engaged in restraining the senses. They gather their senses under the guidance of the self and do not allow them to come in contact with the sense objects. Control them. This is also an act of sacrifice. Others direct their senses only to the pure and unforbidden objects of the senses. This is also a kind of sacrifice. Different kinds of sacrifices. They all go to the absolute. सर्वाणीन्द्रिय कर्माणि प्राण कर्माणि चापरे आत्म संयम योगाग्नौ जुह्यति ज्ञान दीपिते. Others again sacrifice all the functions of the senses and those of the breath, vital energy or prana, in the fire of the yoga of self-restraint, kindled by knowledge. Generally, the pranayama yogis, they do such sacrifices. Just as a lamp is kindled by oil, so also the fire of the yoga of self-control is kindled by knowledge. When the yogi conce- concentrates on fixes his mind on Brahman or the self, the senses and the breath cease to function. The senses and the breath are observed into the cause. Your vipassana, if you go on watching your breath, slowly the breath stops, and after some time the kumbhak, the automatic kumbhak starts. So breathe stops. So that is also a kind of sacrifice only. Dravya yajñas tapo yajña yoga yajñas tatha pare swadhyaya jnana yajñascha jataya sansita vrataha. Others again offer wealth, austerity, and yoga as sacrifice, while the sacrifice of self-restraint and rigid vows offer study of scriptures and knowledge as sacrifice. Some do sacrifice by distributing their wealth to the deserving as charity, dana yajna. Some offer their tapajagya, austerities as sacrifice. Some practice the 8 limbs of Raja Yoga, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahar, dhyana, dharana, dhan, and samadhi, and offer this yoga as a sacrifice. Some study the scriptures and offer it as sacrifice. Anything, any action you do, it can be taken as sacrifice as you think. So it becomes. In this way, there are many kinds of yajnas. Those who know the secret of yajna, sacrifice, they perform yajna in every way. Okay? So tomorrow we shall see. Tomorrow, of course, tomorrow we shall have class. Apane juhyati pranam pranapanam tatha pare pranapana gate ruddhva pranayam parayana. So similarly, the pranayam yogis, there are some sects, they don't do any other steps of Ashtanga Yoga. They do only pranayam. I have seen some yogi, he will stop his breath and you can feel here the breath is coming out. Our Sundaram Sanji, he stops his heartbeats for quite a pretty long period. He used to practice pranayam. So different kinds of yogis are there. Some people only practice yama and niyam, only their whole life is spent for truthfulness. Or some are only sacrificed for only celibacy. Our Bhishma Pitama, thereby he attained will, death. Satya, Brahmacharya, Ahimsa, Buddhadev, the incarnation or personified Ahimsa. So one part also can be taken as lifelong sacrifice. So different kinds of yogis we see, and they are the knower of sacrifice, and they perform sacrifice in different ways. अपाने जुह्यति प्राणम प्राणापाने तथा परे प्राणापान गतिम रुद्ध्वा प्राणायाम परायणः. Some yogis practice Purak, some yogis practice Rechak, and some yogis practice Kumbhak. Our Kakabhusandi, he practices only Kumbhak. In all means, while breathing also you can practice Kumbhak. The secret of Kumbhak. Continuous Sahaj Kumbhak. Easy Kumbhak. All the 24 hours he does Kumbhak only, thereby he won over the death. He became the eternal being. In Yoga Vasishtha it is explained how he practices pranayam. Different kinds of pranayam. The 5 sub-pranas are the other prana, and the other pranas are merged in the chief prana, mukhya prana. By the practice of pranayam, one melts in the other. When the prana is controlled, the mind also stops its wanderings and becomes steady. The senses are also thinned out and merged in the prana. It is through the vibration of prana that the activities of the mind and senses are kept up. Senses and mind works only when prana activates them, or else they have no energy to do anything. If the prana is controlled, the mind, the intellect and the senses cease to function. When you are able to practice Sahaj Kumbhak, easy Kumbhak means all the time you can have Kumbhak, restrain your breath, then the senses, the mind have no strength at all. They have no energy to get out from your clutches. As you like, you can make them do. So this is the glory of pranayam. The pranayam also is practiced as yajna, sacrifice. अपरे नियताहाराः प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुह्यति सर्वे प्येते यज्ञविदो यज्ञक्षपितकल्मषाः. Others, they practice fasting, our Gandhi ji. अपरे नियताहाराः, others who regulate their diet, offer the breaths in life breaths. All these are knowers of sacrifice, whose sins are destroyed by sacrifice. Sacrifice destroys all your sins, means all your actions. Action becomes inaction. Niyataharaha means persons of regulated or limited food. They take moderate food by rigid dieting. They control the passions and appetite is by weakening the function of the organs of actions. Yogis pour the life breaths as sacrifice in the controlled life breath. The former becomes merged in the latter. Performance of the above sacrifice leads to the purification of the mind and destruction of sins. So thereby performing the sacrifice any way you like, you burn away all your sins, mind gets purified. Purification means one-pointed, and when mind becomes one-pointed, naturally you are led to the absolute silence, equilibrium. That is the truth. So tomorrow we shall see further. यज्ञाशिष्टामृतो भुजो यान्ति ब्रह्म सनातनम नायम लोकस्य यज्ञस्य कुतोन्यः कुरुसत्तम. O Arjuna, without knowing the secret of yajna, sacrifice, how can you do any actions? You have to learn. Do whatever you can, but let it be a sacrifice. All these are the knowers of sacrifice. They do sacrifices in different ways. Tomorrow we shall see. Hari Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadguru Bhagavan ki jai, Sachidananda Bhagavan ki jai, Ta ki jai, Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Hari Om.